baseball, man.
I want to come to your basketball party.
Oh, come on. You have a great time.
Yeah.
Anything
Who's
about
going
sport.
all the way?
You know what?
Maryland.
I want Maryland. I really hope Maryland. But if not, Florida's looking problematic for people.
Yeah, Houston too.
Houston does look good, but Florida got that big boy, and they playing for a lot of confidence. But this, that's gonna be my next job. All right, ready? Good morning. I want to thank City Council President and my friend Zeke Cohen for being here today, joining myself today to announce the indictments of 4 defendants in 3 different violent crime cases against vulnerable individuals. I'd like to acknowledge Deputy State's Attorney Catherine Flynn, as well as Tom Donnelly, my Chief Sherry Green, the Chief of Economic Crimes, and Homicide Assistant State's Attorney Megan Gallo for being here as well. Also, we have my Chief of Homicide, Michael Dunte, as well. Defendants Tavon Singleton, Cassandra McCrae, Brian Payton, and Andrew Reed face a combined sentence of 3 life terms plus 163 years in prison if found guilty of all charges alleged against them. I'd like to remind everybody that an indictment is not a finding of guilt. An individual charged by indictment is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty at trial. Singleton and McCrae were indicted for the first-degree murder of Antoinette Jennings, 52, and related charges for 4 other non-fatal victims, including an 11-year-old child. If found guilty of all charges, Singleton faces life without the possibility of parole plus 20 years, and McCrae also faces life without the possibility of parole of additional 20 years. Payton was indicted for the first-degree murder of Carol Wanson, age 56. He faces, once again, life without the possibility of parole, plus 35 years if found guilty of all charges. Reed was indicted of assaults on his 70-year-old grandmother and his 70-year-old grandfather and their adult daughter. Mr. Reed faces 88 years if found guilty of all charges. My office is unwavering in our commitment to pursue lengthy sentences for those who inflict cruelty and violence on members of our community. These crimes are inhumane acts affecting victims ranging from 11 to 70 years of age and inflicting trauma upon our entire city. Those who have the capacity to exhibit such violence and heartlessness toward the vulnerable endangered everyone in our city. Together, my prosecutors and I are dedicated to ensuring justice prevails in these cases. Now let's talk about the Singleton and McCrae cases, these details. Once again, everybody is presumed innocent and all these facts are alleged. Be alleged on January 22nd, 2025, Baltimore police were notified of a shooting on the 5400 block of York Road in Baltimore City, involving multiple victims suffering from gunshot wounds inside a Honda CRV. Upon arrival, detectives learned that one of the victims, Antoinette Jennings, was pronounced deceased at the scene. 4 other individuals were inside this vehicle, as Miss Jennings was as well. 2 of these victims were shot, including an 11-year-old child. 2 additional victims, including a 6-year-old child, were unharmed. CCTV footage showed an altercation, is alleged to show an altercation at a children's basketball game involving the victim's family and a woman who was later identified as Cassandra McCrae. It's also important to note that I signed the life without the possibility of parole on both of the individuals who were charged in this murder. The Payton case, these details are as follows. On August 16, 2024, at approximately 6:22 p.m., the Baltimore police responded to 600 block of Springfield Avenue for a report of a shooting. Upon arrival, police officers observed a black male laying on his side with multiple gunshot wounds to his head and torso. EMS paramedics pronounced the victim, who was later identified as Carol Wanson, deceased at approximately 6:30 p.m. Further investigation revealed that the victim was walking in a nearby convenience store with his 2 minor grandchildren when he was passed by a man, once again alleged and identified as Brian Payton, who began shooting the victim multiple times in the head and torso. The defendant is prohibited from possessing a firearm due to a prior conviction in 2024 for for assault in the second degree. And once again, I also signed the request to have life without the possibility of parole on Mr. Payton. The Reed case details are as followed. Once again, like the other two, everybody's presumed innocent until found guilty in a court of law, and all these are alleged allegations. On December 17, 2024, a couple, both 70 years of age, were in their home at the 5700 block at Nasco Place here in Baltimore City, where they reside with their grandson, their defendant, Andrew Reed. The defendant went to his grandfather, who was in the end stages of terminal cancer and limited to a bed, where he began to strike the victim, his grandfather, in the face and body and choke him. The defendant was retaliating because his grandmother refused to take him to the smoke shop so he could purchase marijuana. The defendant's grandmother begged him to stop and began to record the incident. The grandmother called her daughter at work for help. When her daughter entered the house, she observed the defendant allegedly striking her mother and her father. The defendant placed his hands around the neck of both women and forced them to the ground. Once on the ground, the grandmother could not get back up due to her limited mobility. The defendant's grandfather passed away 3 days later on December 20th, 2024, due to his terminal illness. These allegations are shocking and disturbing, and the trauma inflicted upon these families and communities is real. I look forward to seeing justice rendered in each of these cases for the sake of the victims, their families, and our community. I will now turn things over to City Council President, my friend, Z. Cohen.
Well, let me first thank State's Attorney Bates and the entire State's Attorney team for the great work that you all are doing to keep our city safe. And it is worth always reiterating that Baltimore is seeing some of the sharpest declines in violent crime of any city in America. That is due to partnership between the police department, state's attorney, mayor, governor, city council, and the citizens of this city that have said enough is enough. Let's be clear, our strategy is to go after violent offenders such as the alleged perpetrators that Mr. Bates stated in this case with the full force of the law. But we also must heal the cycle of trauma that victims experience and their family experience when someone gets hurt or killed. We also know that protecting vulnerable residents is absolutely critical to Baltimore's renaissance. State's Attorney Bates and I agree that our elders deserve safety and respect. A few years ago, I started to visit some of the older adult living facilities in Baltimore. And what I found was shocking and appalling. Some of the places I wouldn't put my dog, let alone my grandmother. We saw broken elevators. We saw places that had been filled with mold and mildew and asbestos. We saw entire HVAC systems that were down, so there was no heating and cooling. That's why the council stepped up to pass the Strengthening Renters Safety Act to make sure slum landlords that abuse our and other vulnerable people are held accountable. That's also why we created the Baltimore City Office of Aging, so that our elders can receive the services they deserve. The unspeakable crimes perpetrated against older adults in these cases deserve and merit swift justice. That is why I'm glad to be here with our state's attorney. We must also, though, think about the children and the family members who witnessed these callous, life-ending acts. We know that adverse childhood experiences or traumatic events inhibit our children's ability to learn and grow and develop healthy relationships. They cause an increased likelihood of addiction, and exposure to trauma increases one's likelihood of either being a victim or a perpetrator of a future crime. But we also know that healing is possible and that we can break the cycle of violence. That's why I'm proud that in 2020, Baltimore became the first city in the United States of America to legislate trauma-informed care, so that every child growing up in this city will have caring adults, whether in a rec center or a library who understand some of what they've been through and can help to heal through different modalities like meditation, like restorative practices. And it is exactly this type of partnership. And I am so proud of the state's attorney's office for making sure that the attorneys, and particularly those in victim services, are trained in trauma-informed care. It is exactly this type of partnership that will heal our city. We know that Baltimore deserves justice and it deserves healing, and that is what you hear before you today. I am always thrilled to be here with my friend, State's Attorney Ivan Bates. Baltimore is writing the greatest American comeback story in history, and it is the combination of swift justice and healing for victims and witnesses that we badly need, and that is what is represented here today. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. At this moment in time, if there are any other questions, I'd like to thank, City Council President Z. Cohen for joining us today, representing the City Council, and, talking about the importance of trauma-informed care, as well as also making sure that we focus on making sure we protect our vulnerable and older adults. At this point in time, I'd open up for any questions.
Go ahead. You're up. State's Attorney, I remember when you had first got into office, you came on our airwaves, you had talked about kind of being behind on caseloads because your office didn't have enough help. Do you feel you're in a position now where you're able to process these things, get these things along, get, basically an easier time with your office at this stage?
Well, what I will say is that we've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. We have great, the people that you see against the wall are some of the finest leaders and individuals I've ever worked with. Their leadership has allowed, for instance, in the homicide division, the work that Michael Dunty has done in terms of making sure that his prosecutors are there, are prepared, making sure that they have a better working relationship with the police department. When I came in this office, there were 25 cases apiece. Now I think they're down to about 14, 15 homicides apiece. Megan Gallo, my first year, thinks she tried 16, 17 homicide jury trials in 1 year. That's absurd. So what you can see is that the relationship with the police department is working. We're starting to hire more prosecutors. We still need more money to continue to hire more prosecutors, but working together. And we are making strides, but it's a total team effort. And once again, the individuals you see here, from the deputies, Donnelly and Flynn, phenomenal job. We didn't even have an older adult division. Then Chief Green put together an older adult division as well as economic crime. So the plan is starting to come together. We're halfway there. It's halftime. Still, we got a whole long way to go.
Yes, sir. I sort of picked up on the motive in two of the cases. In the Payton case, with the elderly man and the two minors, can we talk about sort of what prompted that? Did they have knowledge of each other? Was there a motive in that case?
We can only go so far into it, but it's hard to necessarily say. But I think about it. You're walking down the street with your two grandchildren, going to the corner store, and all of a sudden someone basically takes a gun and blows your brains out next to your grandchildren. For us, we don't really care about the motive. We care about your actions. We're so violent and so that you deserve to be in prison the rest of your natural born life.
Anyone else? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The releases, you guys have the release. Charging documents are linked in on each of their names. So when you see it says like read case, click the link.